Hey guys, so with everything going on these days, from the new Texas abortion restrictions to anti-vax protesters, I thought we should take a step back and do something more chill today. Just kidding, we don't have time to rest, there's too much bullshit on the internet.
Last week, our school board here in Nashville decided to instate a universal mask mandate for all students and all staff and anyone else who sets foot inside the building.
Okay, so you can kind of see where this is going. Basically, Matt Walsh here became a little triggered because the school implemented a mask mandate for anyone in the building as long as you're indoors. This is actually a perfectly reasonable request. We see mask mandates being implemented pretty much everywhere in the United States now, and it's not a new concept. Now, if this were something like a vaccine mandate, then that would be a different story, but mask mandates have been implemented since the early days of the pandemic. Now, people who are against wearing masks are usually little bitches who just can't stand a little tiny cloth over their disgusting faces, and oftentimes they overestimate the quote, damage that masks cause, which is pretty much nothing. So let's dive a little bit into this and see what kind of arguments Matt Walsh will provide us.
There are many other offenses a student might commit beyond the indecent exposure of his nose and mouth. As the Tennessean reports, the offenses include, quote, refusing to wear a mask or maintain social distancing, leaving a designated area, or intentionally exchanging bodily fluids such as coughing or sneezing are considered violations of the district's protocols. Coughing and sneezing now count as misconduct. I'm sorry, not coughing and sneezing, only intentional coughing and sneezing.
I'm 100% sure Matt here is misrepresenting the rules in some way, shape, or form, but the school most likely meant intentionally coughing or sneezing on another person, especially if you're trying to get them sick. And that's a key difference. Coughing or sneezing itself isn't an offense, especially if you do it into a mask. But if you go up into someone's personal space and intentionally cough on them, then yes, I can see why that can be considered an offense. Even if we're not in COVID times, if you go up to someone else and intentionally cough on them, that's very offensive and you shouldn't be doing it. And especially during times of COVID, if you know you're sick and you're coughing on someone else, that's basically an indirect attempt at murder. Now, Matt goes into a little bit into the punishments of doing such an offense, such as warning the student and then escalating it to their parents if they repeat the offense, which honestly is not harsh at all. But Matt here spends at least 5 minutes crying about it on camera, so we're going to cut out his shamefulness and get to the part where he actually confronts the school board.
I witnessed this myself last night as I attended the Metro Nashville School Board meeting to lend my support to the sane parents who don't want to muzzle their kids for 8 hours a day, and also to make my own voice heard. Now, I should acknowledge at the outset that yes, I homeschool my kids. They aren't setting foot inside a public school, especially not after what I witnessed last night.
Good. Keep your unmasked kids at home.
The public school system is a government institution, and I am a taxpayer, which means I get to make my voice heard, and I will, repeatedly and loudly.
Every video I watch from Matt here, he always spends at least 2 minutes justifying why he's allowed to speak on a certain issue. Like, Jesus, man, we get it. You're allowed to have wrong opinions. No one is stopping you from ranting into a video camera.
Listening to these parents defending the mask mandate, many of them tearfully thanking the school board for imposing it. Thank you for saving my kids, with tears in their eyes. I'm not exaggerating. And watching this, what jumped out at me, of course, was the fear. I mean, they were sometimes literally trembling in terror, deathly afraid that their children would die from a virus that has killed 0.008% of the 42 million children it has infected. A mortality rate so low that it simply is not rational to worry about it.
Yes, COVID deaths and hospitalizations among kids is low compared to the average adult. However, you have to understand that children can transmit the virus just as easily. A lot of people who are for mask mandates aren't necessarily worried about their kids dying from COVID, but more so if they bring the virus home and infect older people in the household. And that's the idea of mask mandates in schools. We are worried about the children because even a low mortality rate is still a mortality rate, but we are more so worried about the spread of the virus. Getting infected by COVID is not just about you, it's about everyone you come into contact with in the next 2 weeks. This applies to mask and vaccine mandates really everywhere across the United States. Sure, we're worried about you getting infected, but we're more worried about who you're potentially going to spread it to. To take this point further, there's a scientific measurement value we call R0. R0 represents the average number of people someone infects after they themselves are infected. So for example, the R0 value of influenza is about 2. So for each person infected, they on average transmit it to 2 other people. Obviously, the higher the R0 value, the more contagious it is. The original SARS-CoV-2 virus had an estimated R0 value of 3. Using this metric, it is 1.5 times more transmissible than influenza. Continuing on, the vast majority of cases in the United States right now is caused by the Delta variant, which is not only deadlier but also more contagious. It has an R0 value of somewhere around 8.5. 8.5, that is almost 3 times as infectious as the original SARS-CoV-2 virus, and over 4 times more infectious than influenza. So yes, when we look at a child getting infected, the child will probably be fine. But what about the 7 other people that he or she could potentially transfer it to?
I tried to make that point when it was my time to speak. We'll play some of that for you now. And by the way, the city has not posted the video of the meeting yet, so we had to make do with the cell phone video my producer Sean took. The audio isn't the best, but bear with us, and here it is.
You and the school board have decided that our kids should go to school all day, every day, wearing muzzles like rabid dogs. I have listened to your arguments, and I've noticed that they're missing a few things, namely evidence, data, science, common sense, and basic human decency. You presented no facts at all, so let me do that now. Here they are. COVID poses almost no risk to our kids at all. 4.2 million children have tested positive for COVID. A total of 0.008% of them have died. What about the flu? The CDC estimates that 480 kids died from the flu in the 2018-2019 season. That's more than have died from COVID in a year and a half.
Okay, so I don't know where you got the 480 kids dying from the flu in the 2018-2019 season, but a quick look at the CDC's numbers say there were 188 pediatric deaths from the flu during that season. So already you're forging numbers. Now let's take a look at what you presented for COVID. You said 4.2 million children tested positive for COVID, which by the way is a way underestimate, but you might have filmed this video a while ago, so we'll let that slide. Then you said 0.008% of kids who are infected actually died from COVID-19. So that gives us 336 according to your numbers, which is definitely larger than 188. So basically you just increased the number of pediatric flu deaths by 3 times, then said, hey look, more flu deaths in 2018 to 2019 season than COVID, but that's actually not true whatsoever.
Now, did anyone on this board suggest at any point that year that kids wear masks? Did anyone in this room suggest that at any point anyone wear masks for flu, which again is more dangerous to kids than COVID? That's a fact.
You must feel pretty proud of yourself to forge numbers and present it like that in front of a group of parents who probably don't know any better. Fact checking is important, people.
Do you know what it's called when you force your children to wear masks for fear of a virus that poses almost no threat to them? It's called child abuse. You want to look up a disease, look up Munchausen by proxy, because that's what this is.
I don't understand why anti-maskers treat masks as if it's like this murder device that stops you from breathing or something. Like, no, it's just a piece of cloth over your mouth. Unless you have some sort of breathing condition like asthma, you're going to be fine. And many people with asthma are still regularly wearing masks. What's next? Asking kids to wear a shirt in the classroom is a form of child abuse? You are literally no different than hypothetical people who complain that wearing a shirt is child abuse.
Now, do any of you know what sort of psychological damage we do to children by forcing them to cover their faces? Teaching them that the air is toxic.
No one is teaching them that the air is toxic. Teaching kids general hygiene and wearing a mask in a pandemic is a good thing. You need to be responsible for your own health so that you don't transmit the virus to other, more vulnerable people. You cite psychological damage, but don't say anything about how this is psychologically damaging kids. That's the thing about batshit crazy people like you. You never present any data or evidence, but if you do, you made them up. By the way, a lot of this is not only to protect the kids and the people they interact with, but also the teachers. Literally, just the other day, 15 educators died from COVID-19 within 10 days in Miami, Florida. COVID transmission is a two-way street.
Depriving them of the ability to see each other's faces. Do you know what kind of damage that does? Have you thought about it?
Oh no, oh no, oh no. You can't see a classmate's nose and mouth for like a few months. The fucking horrors.
Have you wondered about the health effects of forcing kids to breathe through sweat and spit and dirt-soaked rags every single day? Are you sure that there are no health risks?
If you think there are health risks, be my guest and present some of them. I've done a few videos already explaining why there are no health risks unless you have a pre-existing breathing condition, which by the way, I'm sure the school board would make an exception for students that have actual medical conditions. But then again, you being an anti-masker probably don't understand actual science because scientists around the world recommend mask wearing. If there were truly any real detrimental effects of masks, we'd know them by now.
Do you know what the effect is on children developmentally if they're not able to read each other's facial cues?
You don't learn facial cues in schools. You learn them throughout your life when you're young, especially from your parents. The last I checked, no one is forcing your kid to wear a mask while at home or outdoors. Oh no, my kid won't be able to learn facial cues because of a few hours a day they can't see another person's mouth.
What about learning to read and they can't see the teacher enunciating the words?
Language learning comes from immersion, listening, and experimentation. There's no part of watching someone's lips that significantly helps in pronunciation. In addition, even if you believe it is important to see someone's lips when learning to read, the teachers alone can temporarily take off their masks. The kids can keep them on.
What does it do to a child's developing immune system if he has to wear a mask all day, every day?
It is a myth that wearing masks reduce the effectiveness and development of the immune system. I made a video on this already, but basically this claim stems from essentially a lack of understanding on how the immune system works. Before you make a biological claim, be sure to have evidence to present it. All you're doing right now is asking questions, which is a dirty trick to get people to agree with you. But in an actual effective debate, you need to come up with facts on your own and evidence to back up those facts, not just ask questions all day. It's cringe.
You're satisfied to place this burden on children anyway. And why? It's not to keep them safe. It's not to keep the adults safe. They can all get vaccinated if they want. No, you do it to make yourselves feel better and to protect yourselves politically.
Adults can be vaccinated, but effectiveness is not 100%, and some people, due to pre-existing immunity issues, cannot get vaccinated. Look, to be clear, I've always been a proponent of mask mandates and vaccinations, and whatever measures can be taken to reduce COVID spread, the better. While I do agree with mask mandates in elementary schools, I do think we have higher priorities right now, such as getting all adults vaccinated first and enforcing masks in other areas of large gatherings. I am a huge proponent of vaccination passports and vaccination mandates, because although COVID does spread through children in schools, it affects the adult population a lot more. So although the mandates in schools is one way of slowing down the spread of COVID, we can definitely be doing a lot more elsewhere. That's the video today, guys. Thank you for watching, and thank you to Fireshard, Alan Morton, and Miss Fixit for their generous support on Patreon. I will see you next week.